Can I ask you a question which might be slightly off the point? If the government had let Anglo go to the wall, which is as a direct consequence of its own actions,
Sure.
disaster for depositors, disaster for shareholders, disaster for everything. Presumably that would have led to a run on Anglo, or I beg your pardon, on Bank of Ireland and AIB. Is there a possibility that if that had happened, Santander would have bought one of them for €1 and started up a whole new banking system? And
Well, again, you see, revisiting 2008
I know,
is a really
I know.
easy
It's,
option. You know, it's a really easy option. What I'm trying to suggest is, no matter what decision they made then, whether we disagree with it or agree with
We're
it,
there.
it's the decisions they made afterwards that were the disaster. It's not the decisions they made on September the 29th. I kid you not, in 3 months' time, you're going to have another September 29th episode, because what's going to happen now is it's the delay and praise strategy. And what we'll have is, we'll say we're going to have a bond auction. We will know the night before that it won't be a success, and we'll have all our ministers on a plane to Europe trying to sort things out at the last final minute to try and borrow money from the EU. That's what's going to happen in February. And then your ministers are going to turn around again and say, sure, Jesus, we didn't see this coming. That is exactly what's going to happen, because, again, they're not making the hard decisions. It is very, very clear that we need a plausible plan, and a job strategy is very important. Now, you know, we have spent 2 years in this country talking about the banks, talking about Anglo-Irish Bank, you know, when it's obvious that we need to create jobs. So
But
we've
don't
wasted
we
2
need
years.
money to create jobs?
Of course we need money, but you know, that's why part of the budgetary process should, you know, again, you're going to be talking about the society, how it should run. And the thing is, you would need to be able to run a more efficient economy. How would you do that? You have to tackle the sheltered economy. You have to be able to bring down lower PRSI. Very difficult conversation, but you'd have to lower the minimum wage, for an example. You know, these are things that are very, very difficult to do, and I understand most of your listeners will start calling in and go, you can't lower the minimum wage, and I totally understand how frustrated they are about it. But these are the only things you can do is to stimulate the economy. You need some stimulus in the economy. We haven't got money to stimulate the economy, so we have to make political decisions to stimulate
If the IMF or the European Fund gets involved, I was listening to somebody talking about other countries' experience of them going in, like closing down hospitals and things like that.
Unfortunately for Irish people, you know, we think that they'll come in and run our country for us. That is actually not what they do. They just lend you money, and they make very, very harsh terms about getting their money back. They're very similar to the bond markets. Their first thing when they give you the money is, we better make sure we get our money back. So one of the things, for an example, they would look at straight away with our unemployment benefits. They would say it's too high. So if we're lending you money, you're going to have to cut that. That's what they would say to you, or else we're not going to lend you money. We'd also give you targets within 6 months. You have to put these things in place, or we're not giving you any more money. So, you know, don't believe, like, I know your listeners, there's a lot of people in Ireland saying the same thing. God, I wish the EU would just come in, get it over with, and we'd be better. But unfortunately, that is not the case. The terms that they would come in under would not be that good for Ireland.
Right.
So I wouldn't be in favour of that. I think we can still get ourselves out of this mess. But
you do?
Yes, absolutely. I'd be full faith that if we got in a new government in place with a plan, I would say then you've got to get a crisis team together of maybe 5 people, Colin McCarthy, maybe Konstantin Gurdjieff, whoever you decide to pick, and get 5 wise men in there and say, this is what we need to do in the next 6 months. Then you can have your conversations about what sort of a society Ireland can have. We have to get ourselves out of this mess in the next 3 months.
Right. Caller says, what are bond yields? Don't forget, you said this was for the layperson.
Oh, sorry. Bond yields are just the rate of interest that you borrow money at. Okay? So obviously, it's a little bit like going to the bank and asking for a mortgage. If you can't afford to pay the interest on that mortgage, you can't borrow. Okay? Now, that exactly. So what the bond markets, or say the banks in this case, are saying to us, we will lend you money, but only at 7.8%. 7.8% you cannot run the Irish economy on. We can't borrow money at those levels.
Isn't that how subprime worked?
That's exactly it.
That you went into an ordinary mortgage holder and they said, no, sorry, we can't lend to you. So you go to somebody else and they charge you more interest.
Well, here's another, I don't want to get too technical, but here's another reason why the bond markets are so scared this week. With all Brian Lennon's announcements, there was one thing that a lot of people, you know, in Ireland wouldn't have picked up, but it's all to do with the promissory notes, which is basically how we're fiddling the system to borrow money at the moment, okay, for our Irish banks. That's basically it. So what he announced was, we're not going to pay the interest for the next couple of years. Now, most people think, well, that's a good idea. Wow, don't pay the interest. You know, we haven't got the money, don't pay the interest. So he announced this as a plausible idea. So he says we're going to save 1.5 billion. Now, what he's doing is what all the property developers in Ireland did. He's rolling up the interest, right? So he's saying, I'm not going to go and even pay this year. I'm going to roll up that interest and, I'll put it on the never, never, just like we all did. This is exactly what Greece did. This is the exact accountancy trickery that the bond markets hate. And they do not believe when your government starts doing things like this, they think they're being tricked. And that is exactly what he has tried to do. It's an accountancy trick again this week. And again, it wasn't picked up. It's picked up by the bond markets, but it's not picked up in Ireland because we're so worried about the 6 billion cuts, which, is obvious that that's what we should be discussing as well. But that is another thing that just happened this week. So you can see why the confidence of the bond markets is totally evaporating.
And, do you think that the advice is available to...
Well, a very good example.
Our ministers.
In Ireland, we reward failure at all levels. This is how you get on in Ireland. If you fail miserably, you will get promoted. Very good example is Chief Economist of Davies. Just promoted as the Chief Economist to the Central Bank and to Chief Advisor to Brian Lennon. Now, I don't know the guy personally. I'm sure he's a very nice guy. Do you believe that he's the best man for the job in this crisis? So Brian Lennon and himself...
Well, he might be.
He might be. Now, see, that's where we get wrong in Ireland. He obviously is not the right person.
Somebody thinks he's the right person.
No, hold on. Nobody thinks he's the right person. They think he's going to be the same guy and say the same things as the people in the Department of Finance have already been saying to the minister. He's going to collaborate... every single thing they've said. He's not going to question anything. He's not going to question the strategy. We absolutely do, because he was on this conference call to the bondholders 3 weeks ago. This is important. It was him and Brian Lennon trying to persuade the world that Ireland Inc. is okay. These were the two guys, and they failed miserably. And that is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to have a go at that man personally. I'm sure that, I'm not saying his credibility, I'm not saying he's lying or anything, but he's obviously not the best man for the job, because his evidence would say for the last 3 to 4 years of everything he said about the Irish economy, again, was incorrect. Why would you put someone like that in a time of crisis at the centre of this? Why wouldn't you phone up Morgan Kelly, a man who has obviously got every single thing correct on how the Irish economy do? Why don't you say, Morgan, we're in a crisis here. What would you do next?
Well, do you remember there was the whole business that Brian Lenihan was going around? He visited David McWilliams famously late at night and went to various people, which at the time, I have to say, I thought was a very sensible thing to do.
So why didn't he take any of the advice? He did not follow the advice of Dave McWilliams. He didn't follow the advice of any of the independent analysts then. What you needed to do then was, yes, put in the guarantee and restructure your banks very quickly. And that is not what he did. He did the first bit, the easy bit, and then he spent 2 years prevaricating and doing absolutely nothing. And that is why we're still announcing things about Anglo-Irish Bank. Don't forget, Bank of Ireland is probably going to need more money next year, even though they say it's not. The government came out...
You don't believe a word they say now?
Absolutely not. I don't believe it, because their numbers are incorrect. Like, for an example, I was on this programme maybe 6 months ago with Charlie Bird, and I was saying that the Allied Irish Bank is definitely going to be majority owned in about 3 to 4 months. There was a guy here from the Banking Federation said no chance. Brian Lennon said no chance. And of course it's correct. Look, it's not just me that is saying this. There is many